Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Hemp Homeschool. I'm Katie at Kentucky Hemp Works, and we are here with our Lesson 12 of Hemp Homeschool. I have a very special guest with me today. This is Kendal. Kendal is a lifelong farmer from here in Christian County, and he and I have been working together for the last several years, growing hemp here on his farm. And so we just wanted to take some time to talk about some of the things we've gone through, some of different aspects of hemp farming, and farming different types of crops and how to farm those crops, and also just a little bit about our history and how we got to this point. But Kendal, thanks for coming today. We're really excited to see you. He's usually out on the farm somewhere. Typically, I would say, running back and forth between fixing something, chasing rabbits, putting out fires. Yeah, sometimes literally. So will you tell us just a little bit about, how just your farming throughout your life, how long you've been farming and what kind of crops you raise? And
well, I've been farming basically all my life since full time since 1977 when my wife and I got married and built our house here on the farm. We've been here ever since. We can't seem to get away. But we started out growing mainly tobacco, of course, corn, soybeans, wheat, everything plays a role into that. Over the last few years, tobacco's kind of been diminished in the state of Kentucky, especially in the cigarette tobaccos and whatnot. We still grow right smart tobacco, but it's for the smokeless snuff tobacco, stuff like that. Cigarette tobaccos around here have kind of gone the way of the buffalo, so we've got into the hemp business 4 years ago, trying to take up some of that slack, and it's been interesting, we'll say.
Yeah, definitely. But hemp isn't the first experimental crop you've grown. You've
well,
grown
no,
other...
we've dabbled in. We've tried to grow produce crops. We've tried to grow specialty crops, specialty kinds of beans. We haven't really found anything that hit that niche until we, hemp's the closest thing we've come to, and it's not without problems, but it has more promise, I think, than produce crops. Tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. There's no real shortage of tomatoes and cucumbers. If I grow a tomato now, I've got to bump somebody else's off the shelf, and that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to come up with something new, although it's not exactly new, but I mean it would be, commodity production of hemp would be new certainly to this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's definitely new for everybody that's involved in it. When we started with just less than 2 acres. When we started in 2014, we started with less than 2 acres, and we're so far in over our heads we didn't know what to do. So when you and I met, that was right after the harvest in 2014. It was actually Christmas time in 2014, maybe right at New Year's. And so we got to talking. I talked to some of the guys that you worked with and asked if there was any interest in growing hemp from your crew. And it seems like the other guys that you work with, Bruce and Kent, that they were just sort of ready to let you try it out and get your feet wet and see what happens. I think even though you've never done it before.
Well, somebody has to be the guinea pig. But that's the way with any venture. The other things that we've tried, you have to try something and see if it works and see what works and what don't work. The hemp has not been with that. We've tripped and stumbled and had to get up and dust ourselves off a time or two. But like I said, there's so many different areas that hemp can be applied to. Some of these are eventually going to pan out, I think, to be a viable commodity for Kentucky farmers that will take the place of some of the lost tobacco acres.
Yeah.
but it's not gonna be without some growing pains. We have some infrastructure coming online, but we still have a need for a lot more in a lot of different areas, and that's just going to take time. And of course, economically, we have to settle down after all this rhubarb we're going through now. So it's going to be a hiccup in it, but I think it will. I think it will survive. Of course, this is the last year of the pilot program. Next year, FSA and USDA hemp is going into the books as a commodity crop, just like anything else. So we're a little uncertain as to where that's going to leave us, but we'll find out next year, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned infrastructure, and there really wasn't any infrastructure for us. So, like in the first year, in 2015, when you grew hemp, so just to kind of go back there and start at the beginning, I think you were originally going to grow like maybe 5 acres or 20 acres or something like that, and then you kind of realized that it was hard to determine if it was profitable off of that small of an acreage.
Yeah, you have to raise enough of something to see if it's going to be a viable alternative. Of course, like I said, we didn't. Well, you know as well I do. We were out chasing seed cleaners, and there just wasn't anything established for hemp. We didn't know how to harvest it. We had to tinker with combines and seed cleaners, and
this was for the seed crop.
For the seed, for the grain.
This was for seed. So this 2015 crop was grown and ended up being 100 acres, and it was grown for the grain. So we let it get pollinated, produced tons of seeds, and then harvested it. But I mean, from the planting, you had to figure out how to plant without any real advice on that.
Well, what we've done, we've tried to modify existing technology and adapt that to the hemp industry, and we've been fairly successful with that. It's like I said, it's not been without a few stumbles, but over the course of the last 4 years, we've figured a few things out, and you can use existing technology to grow hemp, but it has to be adapted, and it takes a little investment, a little on the farm ingenuity, I guess would be the best way to put that. You have to change things to meet whatever situation you're in.
And that went for the harvesting as well. So planting was, using existing equipment and modifying it to your needs. Harvesting, we're talking about, a combine like you would use for anything else, but then you have to find the type of combine that works the best, the style, the speeds, and all of the.
And another thing you have to deal with, and we did that. There's a lot of misinformation floating around, more then than now. I think people have learned a lot in the last 3 or 4 years, but the first year everybody you'd hear them say, well, yeah, you can grow that. That's a weed. It'll grow anywhere. It's just like any other crop. It has to be treated like a crop. It has to be fed, watered. It needs food and water to grow like anything. It has to be managed just as much as if you were growing any other commodity crop. More so for the certain types we grow now, where you're worried about chemical content and stuff. There's a lot of things. You don't have to worry about how much starch is in your corn. It's just they'll take whatever starch is there. Hemp, on the other hand, there's some things in it that you just can't have in it, and that requires more than a little bit of management, testing, and just like I said, it requires a lot of on-farm knowledge that wasn't out there then. Now there's a lot more information available now. The university's done a lot of work. I think some of the chemical companies are even going to wind up jumping in and doing some testing and whatnot, and there'll be a lot more advances since it's become, once it goes into the commodity status and has more economic viability. I think you'll see a lot more interest and attention paid to it.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll have to see it grown on large scale acreages, and really I think a lot more seed and fiber crops will need to be grown to really bring this into commodity level and commodity status. So Do you want to just try to explain, just in case there's any kids at home, what we mean when we say a commodity versus just a crop that you're trying to sell?
Well,
is there an easy way to explain
I don't
that?
really know what the definition of that would be. You know, commodity crops like corn and wheat, soybeans are, you know, they're produced in mass quantities and traded just like, you know, they're traded like oil or gold or anything else. You know, most of the specialty crops, you know, produce crops, things like that, those are mainly niche markets, area markets. For wheat to become a true commodity crop, I think you will have to see, you know, the oil seed. You know, hemp's a wonderful oil seed, a lot of uses for that oil, but there has to be infrastructure to press that oil, market. Same way with fiber. You know, fiber takes much more infrastructure investment, and that's, you know, we're so far behind other countries. It's just going to take a while to ever get that, you know, ever get that train started down the track, because, you know, it does require a huge infrastructure investment. And
well, think about just the infrastructure that you've built on your own, because normally, you know, if you're harvesting corn or soybeans, you're gonna just take that whole crop down to the local seed cleaner, and you bring in your commodity crop, and they clean everything up, and they clean out. Now, I've talked about this, I think, on Hemp Homeschool before, but they'll clean out the seeds from other weeds that are in the field, and they clean out the little grasshopper legs and the, you know, little leftover stink bugs that get picked up by the combine, and they separate out everything that's not that, you know, kernel of corn size, and they get it to 99.9% purity.
And that's for a seed crop, but just, you know, for the actual commodity crop, the corn that would go to the ethanol plant or go to a feed plant. You know, we have the technology, the combines and everything. You know, the existing technology will clean that stuff good enough in the field. But those crops are completely different. You know, hemp is kind of it's odd. You have to combine that when it's still green. So you have to deal with a lot of high moisture situation, and you can't just combine that and take it and put it in a bin, or you can't leave it on a truck over 2 hours. I mean, it has to be handled completely different, and that's what, you know, that there's a big learning curve even on the farm end of it for us to figure out how to do that and do it cost effectively.
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, the first year we had, you know, maybe one truckload to do that, but when you've got 10 or 12 tractor trailer truckloads, that's a lot different. You know, you can't spread that out on the floor and turn a fan on it. It has to be handled completely different, and that's the kind of stuff. But there are companies, you know, that are setting up to do that, and I mean, each person will just have to seek out where they can get that done at a rate and a price they can afford, and try to leave a margin in there for the growers. Bottom line is, if it's going to be a commodity crop, farmers have to make some money on it. There's plenty of stuff to do that you can't make money on.
Yeah, but those are called hobbies, not
that's
businesses,
we've got
right?
enough hobbies. There's enough hobbies floating around. We don't need any more hobbies.
Yeah.
What I would say, though, I mean, to younger people or anybody that might be interested in getting in the hemp business right now, I mean, this particular year, last year was the first year that we had, you know, pretty heavy interest in a lot of new growers, and quite frankly, as often happens with farm commodities, there's a lot of overproduction. There's tons and tons of hemp floor material sitting around right now in warehouses and barns that doesn't have a home.
Yeah.
The one thing I would just caution anyone to know right up front that this is not a golden goose. It's a crop like anything else. It takes a lot of input, a lot of work. But if you don't have a place to sell it, it's not very tasty. You can't make apple pie out of it. It needs a place to go before you produce it.
Right, and it's not something that, you know, when comparing it to the apple pie example, you know, it's not like you can just take it down to your farmer's market either and sell it.
That's what I mean. There's not a, you know, this is strictly a specific use product. and there's not that many people out there looking for it right now. You really need to know where it's going before you grow it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the biggest problems that we've seen. Well, I would say this past year, but really in previous years as well. And I guess maybe we can kind of wrap up with this conversation here. But the problem that we've seen it with a lot of them is that, you know, people want to grow it, they want to get their feet wet, but they also are expecting to be able to find somewhere to sell it. And if you can't find somewhere to sell it and you're stuck with it, and you end up getting paid pennies on the dollar for your crop, or not getting paid at all, or, you know, I mean, we've had so many people that have had just the rug pulled completely out from under them, and not in a good way either. I mean, people who have deliberately done that. Well, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberately. But at the same time, there is a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities out there for people to start brainstorming on products that can be brought to market. And if you think about the way that we got started, you ended up growing 100 acres that first year. And now a lot of that got washed away. We had a terrible rain that year, and had to replant some, and still got washed away again. But you know, we did 100 acres. You did 100 acres. We watched and took pictures and sang songs to the hemp seeds in the fields. But once it was over, we had developed this relationship to where we could process and manufacture the crop that you were growing, even though we weren't really 100% sure what we were going to do with it. So, I mean, we were figuring things out as we go. We built that relationship together. We now are renting space from you on your farm to bring your crop in and crush it and pay you, sell it, turn it into something amazing, something that fills a need and benefits people. And we did it without knowing from the very beginning how it was going to work out. This morning we shared a little teaser for the homeschool video, and it was a picture of you and me, and it's one of my favorite pictures ever, because we're both looking into this bin. It's the wagon, that big truck full of hemp seeds, and you had just harvested, you know, your first huge crop, probably one of the biggest crops in the country that year. And we're looking over the railing into this bin, like, okay, now what are we gonna do with this? And we've been figuring it out as we go.
That was the question of the hour. Was like, man, what are we gonna do with this? But you know, the thing about it, that's what's required in any new venture. Mm-hmm. You do have to have people working together to create markets. You know, they may start out small, but you never know what's going to take off.
Right.
We have a question in here that I missed a second ago from Louie. When do you start to test for CBD levels? How many weeks into flower?
That's entirely dependent on your location and the length of the light day. In this particular area in Kentucky, normally somewhere around the 1st of September, you need to get an idea of where you are. Anywhere, I would say anywhere from like September the 5th to the 15th that's the window we usually work in on the THC testing. And that's, quite frankly, that's the most important thing you'll do. A lot of people last year just didn't pay close enough attention to that. And it's hard. You know, they have, in this pilot program, they've had measures where you could remediate a high test. You know, you could grind the whole plant with it, or, you know, mix the material together and grind it up. You could get a retest. I don't know that will be the case once this thing goes into strictly commodity production. You have to pay, and that's, like I said, that's paramount. You know, if you haven't got a federally compliant product, you've not got anything. I mean, if it doesn't meet these federal guidelines, whether you agree with them or not, if you don't meet those federal guidelines and come up with a compliant material, then you've wasted your time and a lot of money probably. That's the one thing you cannot mess up on. You can over fertilize, you can under fertilize, you can do things, but you've got to stay under the 0.3% THC level, or you have something that's worthless.
He sends his thanks.
You're welcome, Louie. Which I kind of find that a little bit ironic that if you test just over 0.3% THC, you have worthless hemp. But if it is just over 0.3% THC, it's also worthless marijuana, isn't it?
Well,
like it's kind of like it's in this black hole of just hemp that can't be, cannabis that has no value.
Well, if it crosses the threshold, even if you were in a state that would allow you to sell it, that type of marijuana would be worthless.
That's what I mean. There's no drug value to it.
There's a wide gap in the road there, but I'm just saying the 0.3% is what we've been saddled with, and that's what we have to abide by. And that's the most important number you'll hear all day.
It is important. There are a lot of new technologies, though, that I think are going to make that a lot easier. And one of them, I was hoping to attend the grand opening for this, but then we had all the virus stuff and everything shut down. But their Cannabis Labs, who is the lab that we send our samples to in Lexington, they were prepared to launch some new software, some new technology that would actually help that THC testing process that Louie asked about, so that you could take samples throughout the year and actually use formulas to find out when is the best time to harvest and things like that. So I think technology is coming a long way. It's going to help with a lot of these things, and these problems that are caused, we have to build new technology and spend millions of dollars developing this and developing that just to get around government regulations. And I don't know that that's necessarily fair. It's something that we work to fix from the inside. But it is really neat to see the new technologies that are coming out and how people are handling things, and even just some of the things that you've kind of invented here to harvest, to clean things, to separate your seeds, whatever it is. If we let a U.S. ingenuity kind of take over in technology, I think that this hemp industry will benefit tremendously from the brain power that we have in this country. But it's also, it's still kind of sad that most of the technology and adaptations that we have to make is to get around regulations, not really nature. Nature, we work well with nature. I think we don't have too many problems there. Rain sometimes is a problem, but usually it's the regulations.
Or lack thereof.
Yep.
Well, innovation has never been a problem on the farm. I mean, farmers come up with ways to do things. But, and like I said, I mean, the regulations, they need to be tweaked, and they could be adjusted a lot more toward reality, as like I said, closing that gap between, what's legal, what's illegal, and what's useful and what isn't. But bottom line is right now the regs are where they are, and that's what we have to manage our way around. So that's still of paramount importance to staying in business is to be compliant with everything that's being thrown at you, and it's a big challenge.
It is a challenge.
It's a challenge. It's I think that's subject to change, but it will take time, just like anything else. I mean, people have to. It has, instead of trickle down, that has to trickle up.
Yeah.
it has to trickle up to the people that have the power and authority and the votes and that just, and that's the way it works. I mean, when people start making their, that's the one thing farmers, users, consumers, they need to let their representation know that these products are useful, beneficial, and just they need to be made available, because I do think there's a lot of things I don't think, we're looking at the tip of the iceberg as to what can be developed from a hemp plant.
Yeah, I agree. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but well, I look forward to, making that tip of the. Oh, you got another question?
I got one other
Okay.
question. When can you sell your hemp directly to producers?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I can't give you any more capacity.
When you produce a compliant hemp crop.
Yeah, I'm not sure what specifically the question was relating to. I have a feeling though they might be asking about selling it directly to consumers, and so we won't be able to sell it directly to consumers until we loosen up some of the regulations and laws that prohibit hemp, any kind of flower material or live seeds from being sold to just average consumers in Kentucky. Right now, you're required to sell to a processor, and that processor has to be licensed. So, it creates a major bottleneck if you can only sell your crop to 5 companies in the state. That's a huge bottleneck right there, and I don't know if that answered the question, but it's just not going to happen until we change some of the regulations and potentially some of the laws here in this state. On the federal level, it just says if it's less than 0.3%, it's legal. So we like to think that would fly here in Kentucky, but at any rate, Kendal, I appreciate you coming and letting us pick your brain and bend your ear a little bit. And like I said, I'm excited to take this little tip of the iceberg that we've been doing here and turn it into something really great. I think that's what we've been doing, and we appreciate everything you've done to help us get here.
And right back at you.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.